There's a theme that I've seen play out in every part of my life. And it's that when I get exposed to people that are doing more, I started expecting more from myself. Whether it was getting clean, losing weight, getting a job, or starting a business, the pattern was always the same. I thought that I was doing all right until I saw somebody operating at a whole different level, right? And it resets everything. In this episode, I want to share how exposure changed my life and how you can use the same idea to grow your business faster than you ever thought possible.
You're not just climbing trees, you're climbing destiny. Yeah!
All right, so welcome back to the Branching Out podcast. I'm Justin Rademacher, your host, and our mission on this podcast is to help businesses grow. Specifically, we work with tree businesses, but this episode is going to be a little bit different because I really want to talk about this concept of exposure and how business owners can get exposure to people that are further along in their journey and how it resets the measuring stick. In order to do that, I really need to talk about how I got acquainted with the concept of exposure and how I've seen it play out in different areas of my life. So this episode is going to be a little bit different because I'm going to give you guys some personal insight and tell a little bit about my story and my experiences and what that has translated to in the growth of our own business here at Arborist Marketing Pros and throughout my career advancement as a whole. So I'll said all that to tell you that, years ago, I was not the person that I am today, right? I was that person that was sleeping behind buildings. I had a monstrous drug addiction. I was panhandling for change. All of my family had written me off. I truly was at the bottom of the bottom. I had no help. I had nobody, no handouts. No, there was nothing but me and, the rest of the world, seemingly. And so I really thought that getting off of drugs was this impossible task, right? I really just didn't think that I had tried myself, like many of us try different ways of changing our life or getting better in one area or the other. And, I had tried and tried and tried, and everything that I did just seemed to fail. And I could not figure out why I couldn't stop using, right? And so I would see these people that had these lives, and for my personal journey is I was introduced to a 12-step fellowship, and I started going to these meetings, and I would see these people that were just like me, that were struggling to get off of drugs, and they seemingly had their lives kind of figured out. Like they had it together. They were staying clean. Some of them had driver's licenses and cars, and that was like a whole new concept for me because, like I said, I was sleeping behind buildings. I was homeless. And so that being able to witness that and see that there are actually people out here that have been where I've been and are further along in their journey gave me the proof and enough hope that I could do it for myself, right? When I saw that it was possible to thrive, I stopped settling for just being able to survive, right? And so, I get clean and I start doing the same exact thing that these other people were doing. And I'm helping other people along that journey because I figured out that the only way to really continue to grow is to reach my hand back and help people that are on the same path that I was on. And so, I'm still active in my recovery and helping people along the journey. And also, I'm still getting new awakenings and new epiphanies every time that I continue to work on my own program. So this is something that's never ending for me, and it's very personal. Now, I will say that after I had gotten clean, I started putting a little bit of my weight back on from, being homeless and being a drug addict. And I was up to 420 pounds. I've always been big, right? Like I've always been overweight my entire life growing up. And my parents would say things to me like, well, you're just big boned, or it's genetics, or, like you need to love yourself from within, and all these things to like try to make me okay with the unshakable fact that I was obese, right? Like the fact is the way that I lived my life was such a way that I was overweight. But instead of addressing the root cause, what I always did was look for excuses and scapegoats, right? It's my genetics. It's I can't do that. I don't have time to work out. Like all these things that I used as justifications for staying exactly where I was. Not a whole heck of a lot different than the same things that I used when I was, in full blown drug addiction. So, you know, I found through Instagram, some people that had these tremendous weight loss journeys, and I started engaging with their content. And I also found some people in my local network that had gone through these pretty impressive transformations. And now I'm 420 pounds. There's not a whole lot that I can do as far as the gym is concerned. But what I was able to do was just try and just get started, And so in doing that, taking the first step, we always say like taking the first step is always the hardest step. Like walking into the gym or admitting that I don't know how to properly cook healthy meals, like is the first step in actually finding some help, right? And so by me doing that and actually going to the gym, I started to meet some other people that were further along in their journey, and they would show me pictures of when they started. And I was getting that same reinforcement from the creators that I was following on Instagram at the time. And so I saw that it was possible, right? I saw that it was possible. I was exposed to a new idea that maybe, just maybe, if I continue to do this thing, I would also be able to lose weight. Now, I'll tell you that it's been a long road and it's been ups and downs, and people think that like weight loss is just this linear gradual decline, and that has not been my experience. I think with weight loss specifically, they're part of the ups and downs is part of the journey, right? It's like figuring out that the things that used to work for one phase of my weight loss journey didn't necessarily work in the next phase. And I've tried all the different diets, and people will ask me like, well, how did you get the weight off? Because right now I weigh 200 pounds, 208 this morning, right? So that if you're doing the math, that means that I've lost 212 pounds, right? So people will ask me, well, was it keto? How did you do it? And the answer is I've tried and implemented several different things at several different phases of my weight loss journey. And it was only through being exposed to these ideas and these concepts that I was actually able to start practicing them myself. Now, these people didn't just again, I got to reset my bar of what normal looked like and reset the measuring stick of what was possible. So it wasn't just, well, maybe I could lose 50 pounds. Because when I first started, I was like, if I could get down to 350, man, I'd be happy, And then I started working out, and I started seeing these people that had done these massive transformations. And I'm like, you know what? It's not impossible for me to lose 200 pounds. I can actually do that, right? But I had to be exposed to that idea to even believe that it was possible or even have the concept. Because in my mind, I'm still that same person that likes to think, well, I'm big boned. I have a slow metabolism. I have all these excuses when the reality is that I am in control of what my body looks like, right? And so these people didn't just inspire me, they truly did show me the path of how to get there. Talking about showing me the path and career and all that, man, I already told you guys that I was homeless. You can imagine that I had some legal challenges going on as a result of my drug addiction. I'm overweight. I truly was not a productive member of society. And so, I was able to get a job, and I worked my tail off at that job. I probably put in 50 hours a week for years at a company, and, started to get, I got promoted to a manager. And so I started to get a little bit of management experience under my belt, and still having no idea, but I was so grateful that somebody had given me the opportunity, because in my mind, I'm still the homeless drug addict, right? And here I am now. I'm a manager at this. It was a contact center. I'm a manager at this call center, and making sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and we're hitting the numbers that we're supposed to be hitting. It was it was a great experience, and it taught me so many things, because I didn't go to college. I didn't have all this business background. Truly, I had to learn hands-on, hand-to-hand combat. And so it was my first time really being exposed to how businesses were run. Right. And I've always been into technology. I think I built my first website. I want to say I was about either 9 or 10 years old, back on Angel Fire websites. Shout out to the millennials that know what I'm talking about. I built it was funny because it was a website. It was called thetank.net, and it was basically a fan site for the No Limit Soldiers. So I'd have Master P and Silk the Shocker, and I'd have all their bios and all the lyrics to their songs. And this is before Google, before AI. So there was no copy and pasting the lyrics. I would sit down with my headphones, and I would type out the lyrics, And then I'd have to rewind and type and rewind and type. So this was, if you're listening today and you're like Gen Z maybe, or a late millennial, or you weren't in technology in the early like 2000s, a lot has changed in the way that we use the computer and the internet. So, that's a tangent just to say that I've always been fascinated by technology. And so I'm working at this call center and I get this job opportunity at this software company. And I can't believe it, because keep in mind, it hasn't been all that long since I was homeless, sleeping behind buildings, addicted to drugs. And here I am getting a job offer to go work at a software company. I truly thought that I hit the lottery. And so, I took that job. The salary, looking back, wasn't the greatest thing in the world, but it was more than I was used to. And so it was this huge lifestyle change, and I started to see other things that were possible, right? And this whole episode is about being exposed to different ways of thinking, different thought processes, different growth, right? And so I started to learn, at this software company, how a real mature business is actually ran, and learned about systems and sales and leadership and different leadership styles, right? Because not for nothing, but as a manager of a call center, it's keep people on the phones. But when you're actually working with professionals, everybody has a different leadership style that they prefer to work with. And so being able to read that and deliver my leadership with the ability for them to actually comprehend and for it to land with them is super important. And so, I worked at that company for 10 years. And in those 10 years, I played several different roles in that organization. I started out as an account manager, meaning that I was working directly with our customers. And so I got to hear the problems that they were having. I got to practice creative ways of solving those problems. And ultimately, I got to voice the customer concerns through my leadership chain. I started to learn about how to actually position product and how to really build relationships with people, like true business relationships. And the key thing that I'll say there, man, is that, whether it's a business relationship, a friendship, at the end of the day, we're all people. And so many of my colleagues, and me admittedly at first as well, had this preconceived notion that I had to be this buttoned up professional and I can't say anything wrong or anything off color. And I need to be, I had this idea of what the person on the other end of the phone or the Zoom meeting expected of me. And what I found, and this took some years to develop, but what I found is that people just like people, right? And so if I'm authentically myself, the closer that I can get to authentically being myself, the better and deeper and more meaningful the relationship is going to be. And that's not just in my friendships, that's in business, right? If my customers see me as a human as opposed to seeing me as a brand, it makes our relationship so much better. And they feel more comfortable coming to me and say, hey, I see X, Y, or Z going on. I'm a little concerned about it. They're able to bring those things to me earlier and give me more opportunities to solve than if I just pretend that I'm this buttoned up corporation, right? And I'm not being seen as a human. So I learned a lot of that from this job that I was working at. Now I ended up becoming, manager, director, basically executive level. And that's where I really got to see the thought processes of CEO and visionaries and, the thought processes of CFO, the chief financial officer. And I got to work with the CMO, the chief marketing officer, that these people have been doing these things their entire lives. And because I was working directly under the CEO and CFO, I, had a number of embarrassing encounters that I learned lessons from. One of the main lessons is you can't have half-baked data. Your data, you need to understand your data through and through, especially when we're talking about financial things, right? So I learned a lot, and I'm eternally grateful for that position because it taught me everything that I know as it comes to running a business, right? Now, keep in mind that I was I'm going to keep hammering this point, right? I was a homeless drug addict, and now I am overseeing a team of 60 people. Many of them do have college degrees. I don't have any college degree. And I'm not saying any of this to make it sound like I'm this, super intelligent, supreme being. But the point that I really want to make sure that comes across on this episode, and again, this is a different episode. If you were tuning in for some practical business advice, I apologize, but I think that this is important, is that it's not about me as a person. It's about, I was fortunate enough to be exposed to different ways of thinking that have allowed me to change my measuring stick, right? And say, okay, I think that I'm operating up here. But then when I get in a room full of people that are operating up here, I realize that I'm actually somewhere more towards the bottom and I've got a lot of room to grow. And that might seem on its face that it would be like depressing or like beating myself up about it. But the reality is that it gives me a lot of hope and it gives me a lot of reinforced vigor to grind, right? Because like at the end of the grind, let's see my poster up here if you're on the video version of this podcast. So we have to figure out ways to expose ourselves to people that are operating at a higher level. Now, at this job, I think the core thing that I took away was that I realized that in business, not just at work, but in business, it's not just about hustle or grind or tenacity or like my ability to show up on time. It was more about strategy. And strategy, I've heard this, this great definition for strategy, which is basically deploying a limited number of resources against an unlimited number of opportunities. Meaning that, like, I only have so much money, so much time, so much human capital, like employees that are working for me. Those are my limited resources. And so, what do I do with those resources? Because, hey, right now, here it is Sunday afternoon. I could be making a Facebook post. I could be making a very strategic YouTube piece of content. I could be, all these things would be helpful to my business, right? Like I could be just picking up the phone and cold calling people. So why did I choose to make a podcast episode? And that is what strategy really is because there's so many different opportunities that I could deploy my time against or my money, right? Like if I want to invest in something, there's unlimited amount of investments that I can make. And so strategy is really just about have a handful of these resources. Where do I put them? And that's all strategy is, right? And so that's what I really took away from working in this business was I was close enough to the top that I was able to get a lot of these ideas. I was able to get exposed to a lot of these ideas. And that translates into, it gave me enough courage to branch out. And the name of the podcast is Branching Out. It gave me enough courage to kind of step out and start doing my own thing. Now, a buddy of mine reached out to me because I had been wanting to start a business for quite some time. I was going to do business consulting based on everything that I had learned from the job that I was working at. And I wanted to do business consulting and walk into businesses and tell them what was wrong with their business and how to fix it. And they would pay me. That was my concept. My buddy calls me and he says, I want to start a marketing agency. And I'm like, man, I don't really want to do that. And he said, well, we'll be partners. And I was like, all right, let's do it. And so, we started this marketing agency, generalist agency. If you had a credit card and a pulse, we'd take your money. And so we figured out that, it's not very scalable to build a business that is serving every single niche out there. And there are some similarities, don't get me wrong, like having a website, running Google ads, like there's some similarities, but there's enough nuance between the different industries that it makes total sense to niche down. And so, we're talking about exposure, right? And so at this time, I'm one of, I knew a couple of business owners, but not a whole lot. Like most of my friends all had jobs. And so now here I am, I'm a business owner. All my friends, not that having a job or being a business owner, but in my mind, right? I am a business owner. I have no exposure to other business owners or very limited exposure to other business owners. So I'm doing really good in my mind, right? And our business started making some revenue and, we were hiring and we were growing and we were getting clients and people were liking what we were doing for them. Everything was going great until I realized that we're just not making any money. Like we've got revenue coming in. The business is, growing every single month, but my business partner and I are still broke. At the time, I'm still working at the other job. And so, my attention is split. I'm working 10 plus hours a day. It was stressful on my family, my recovery, like my entire life started to get a little unmanageable. And I was exhausted all the time because I'm doing so many different things. I ended up finding basically a mentor group, a coaching group where it was a bunch of other agency owners that, they meet up once a quarter and there's this Facebook community. And so our business pays for my business partner and I to be a part of this agency group. And I can tell you that when we got into the agency group, the first thing that we realized was that we needed to niche down. And we also got some insight on how to better, manage our finances so that my business partner and I can actually take a paycheck, And so there were some really painful things that we had to do to keep the business afloat, because at the end of the day, we were just burning cash, right? We bring in some money, it would go out to salaries and systems and tools and all the things, but we wouldn't make any money. And until we fixed that, we could have grown this thing to a multi-million-dollar a year company and still been broke, because it would have just been a cash eating machine. And so we had to learn that. And the only way that we were able to learn that is through being exposed to people that have been in the same exact place that we were, right? And it gave us the hope, having those conversations with people that are way further along in their business journey and saying, well, what did you do when you got here? And they say, oh, well, I tried this, I did that, this didn't work. And I'm able to save a significant amount of time, because think about this. There's only, again, going back to strategy, I only have a limited number of resources. And the most precious one that I can't replenish is my time. And so, sure, I could, bumper cars my way around business ownership and trying to grow. And, oh, this didn't work, let me try this. Oh, this didn't work, let me try this. I mean, how many tree companies do I talk to that have tried Facebook ads, I've tried Google ads, I've tried Angie's Leads, I've tried this. And if you can cut through all that, because this might take a year, 2 years, sometimes more, sometimes they never really do figure it out. If you can take all that and raise your hand and say, what did you guys do to get to the next level? And there's somebody that's further along that can say, oh, that's a waste of time. That's a waste of time. This is the one thing that worked for us. Now you're able to leverage other people's time and what their hard knocks, so to speak, and implement that into your own business. And what's that worth, right? Because if we're talking about, limited resources, time is the most limited resource. I would much rather buy something than have to give my time to do it. Now, depending on where you're at and what it is that we're talking about, you might be better served to invest the time. But 99% of the time, for most things, we'll call it 9 out of 10, it's going to be better to find somebody that's already been there, even if it costs you a little bit of money, but to get that knowledge. And so, man, I can tell you that being a part of that group really taught me a lot about the business. And we're still part of that group today. At every stage of business that we get to, we unlock new challenges, right? Like, we get shiny object syndrome as business owners, entrepreneurs, because we're very, I think by nature, a little ADD, because we're able to handle multiple things at one time. But it gets really difficult when you start talking about, what do I do? What strategy do I deploy to help grow my business? And there's so many opportunities out there. And so maybe the goal is to make more money. How many times have we thought, well, maybe the tree business isn't the business I need to be. Maybe I need to start a landscape company. Maybe I need to start a plumbing company. Maybe I need to start whatever it is. And the main thing is that we haven't unlocked the next level of our current business. There are multi-million dollar tree companies out there, but not every tree company is a multi-million dollar tree company. Well, what's different, right? Is that at some point we either grow, we beat the boss, we crack the code, we get to the next level of the business, which unlocks all new challenges, or we stay exactly where we are and we think that the business is the problem or the industry is the problem. Or how many conversations I have with people that are like, oh, well, it's oversaturated. It's oversaturated. You just haven't figured out how to stand out above those, we'll call them bottom dwellers that are undercutting everybody on price. You haven't figured out how to get to the next level of business, because the big guys don't worry about the ones that are the ankle biting companies. They're just not concerned with them, because they're not a threat, right? And so we have to understand, why are you competing with the people that are at the bottom of the industry, right? It's probably your advertising or your marketing channels that you're using, or where you're acquiring leads and customers. Because if they're calling 3 or 4 people for an estimate and they're a penny pinching customer anyway, then we probably know that we are in the wrong places, Angie's. So, going back to the concept of exposure, right? And so that's why we're part of the mentorship group. So we get to leverage everybody else's knowledge. And so I want to make sure that this is valuable content. And so for tree service companies, I want to make sure that we're giving you some practical like tips, like some things that you can actually walk away with that will help you to get more exposure, right? And so the first one is to join the right communities. Now that there's a bunch of different ways to do this. And in order to do this, you need to leave the mindset of, well, I can't talk to my competition. You got to leave that at the door, right? Because at the end of the day, operating from an abundance mindset where there's plenty of money out there for everybody, there's so many marketing agencies out there, like they pop up a dime a dozen. All you need is a laptop and a heartbeat to start a marketing agency, right? And so we have a lot of competition in our space, and a lot of these guys aren't charging hardly anything for their services. So our job is just to straight up deliver value, right? And so, but in order to do that, I want to make sure that I'm plugged into the right places. So I can't operate from this very sheltered, it's me against the world mindset. I have to find my peers and figure out what's going well, right? And so if you're able to do that, if you're able to leave the competition mindset at the door, Facebook groups can be a great place to find other high performing tree companies. Ask questions, share some of your own results, like, hey, what marketing channels are working for you? What pieces of content are working for you? Even equipment, what equipment are you finding is really reliable? Maybe if you have some experience with some saws or something that has just been a pain in the, just, avoid these. Like, as much value as we can provide back to these communities is going to signify how much value we're able to get out of these communities. So an action step would be look on Facebook for some groups and find them and join them. Another action step would be get involved in your local ISA chapter. So we're actually part of the ISA as well. And, just meeting up with these guys down, we had a meetup a couple months ago, and just meeting face to face with other tree companies that are, are really growing and are, have come across a bunch of different hurdles is so beneficial. I didn't know that plant healthcare was taking over the industry like it is until going to the ISA, right? And so now that's something that I can have conversations with about my customers. And so it's one of those things where I'm able to get some knowledge from somebody that's further along in their journey. And most people that are further along don't see you as a threat. They don't see you as, oh, this guy's going to come and take all of my business. I just got off a call with another tree company marketing agency and literally gave him like all of my secrets. Like this is how we run these campaigns, right? He's smaller than we are. And, he's reaching out for help. And I know that I have some valuable information after doing this for a few years, and I'm happy to share that information. I'm happy to give the game away for free, because here's what I truly, truly believe is that even if I give somebody else the exact tools and systems and processes that we do, they're not going to compete with us. And because by the time that they get everything built there, we're going to be further along in our journey. And so the same thing applies for tree companies as well. As if you figure something out and you have some valuable insight to share, it's going to be this mutually beneficial relationship. So we'll be at the TCIA in St. Louis this year. And that's another place where, if you haven't been to a TCIA expo, that's a great place to go. And when you go to those places, shake hands. If you are somebody that's concerned about, competition in your local area and the local ISA chapter is too risky for you for whatever reason, then the national events like the TCIA Expo, if you go out there, you can make friends with people that are across the country from you. And, sure, the climates might be different. Some of the things might be different, but a lot of the core concepts will be the same. And so you can share ideas back and forth from across the country from somebody that's not actually competing with you, that might be further along in the journey, exposing yourself to new ideas and thought processes. Too often we think that we need to have all the answers, right? As an entrepreneur, we think that, well, I need to know how to run my business. And that's just not the truth. The people that are doing the best are raising their hands and asking questions on a regular basis. So you could start a mastermind group or an accountability group, like a Zoom call. And you might say to yourself, well, yeah, but tree guys aren't going to want to do like a monthly Zoom call, right? But you might be surprised that the people that are at the level that you are trying to get to, right? They are business savvy. Getting on a Zoom call is something that they are very accustomed to. We're finding oftentimes, right? So the level of technological aptitude, or at least having a person that can help them, gets a little bit more reliable the further up the food chain you go. And so if you're looking to don't take advice from people that haven't been where you are, right? You want to take advice from people that have been where you are and are now levels beyond that. That's where you want to really be able to tap into. You could always just send out DMs or text messages. If you're part of the ISA or the TCIA, you can look up there's a directory on there. You can look up other tree companies and give them a call. I also get a lot personally from different YouTubes, different podcasts. I mean, listen, I'm at the stage in my life where when I'm driving, I'm listening to a podcast because it's time that I just get to feed my brain with new ideas and new concepts. If you know Alex Hermosi, you'll know that a lot of the stuff that I'm saying is very similar to what he talks about, because I call it my brainwashing, right? I want to brainwash myself with thoughts and ideas from people that are further along in the entrepreneurial journey than I am. And any way that I can do that, I'm absolutely going to take advantage of it. And so you really want to try to tune into materials and content that are going to help you with your business strategy as opposed to just tree care. And that opens up a whole wide world of places where you can get information, because at the end of the day, if you're listening to this podcast and you own a tree business, I want to make sure that you understand that you are a business owner and not just a tree guy, right? You're not just a tree service business owner. And so core business concepts will absolutely apply to you. And more specifically, I think that is one of the limiting factors for many of the people that we talk to, is that they don't understand core business concepts, but they're really good at what they do, right? They're really good at tree business. But the core business concepts of how much should I spend on marketing? What should I do with my accounting? Where do I find good help? Like, all those things are core business concepts that you can get an unlimited amount of information from multiple different resources out there. It doesn't have to be industry specific. But if you want industry specific things, the ISA and TCIA are great places to go for that. And you can always find the expert in your field and book a call. Like I said before, we pay monthly. I pay every single month just to have access to, and it's not cheap, just to have access to this wealth of knowledge and this community that helps other agency owners to grow and scale. But I know that whenever I have a problem, I have a team of people that I can ask. They assigned as a personal coach. So it truly is like this mentorship coaching program that, take my money, it's paid for itself in spades, right? And so if you can find that in your industry or in your niche, or even just a business coach, and it costs you a little bit of money to save time of figuring it out yourself, that's an ROI positive equation all day. So, I want to wrap it here, but I want to talk about basically, like, to close it all out. If you want to grow, if you're really interested, because not everybody is, and that's okay too. If you want to stay where you are right now, as long as you're able to ride the wave of all the technology changes and everything like that, cool. That's awesome. I'm excited for you. But if you do want to grow, you have to get around people that are already where you want to be. And exposure is going to reset your standard. It's going to reset your measuring stick. And that's where the real progress starts. Because if I'm okay with where I'm at, but then I find out that I could be so much further along, now all of a sudden I can ask, well, why am I not there? Right? What am I doing differently than these people? And I can get the answers that I need and actually grow my business. I'm telling you, everything changes when you stop trying to figure it all out and start learning from people that have already built what you're trying to build. So until next time, I appreciate you sticking this whole thing out. My name is Justin Rademacher from the Branching Out podcast, and we'll see you on the next one.